Hello everyone, welcome to part 1 of the making of Anna's dress. I will be using this pattern by Berta. This is the 6830 and I am using a thin yellow cotton for the lining as well as a synthetic silk brocade for my main fabric. My pattern calls for 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch of added seam allowance, which I will be adding on all the pieces that it requires. My pattern is designed to have a front yoke, which I will not be needing because I need my dress to be symmetrical in the front. So I will be using this tissue paper to trace the pattern on one side and then flip it and trace the other side so I get a symmetrical front piece. Anna's dress also has this keyhole detail on her chest, so I made it out of paper and I will be adding this to the modified pattern. Now it's time to trace our patterns onto the fabric. I'm using a washable marker and some measuring tape to make sure my seam allowance is exactly 1.5 centimeters. I'm starting with my lining as some sort of a mock-up, and I will start working with the silk only after I finish the lining. I'm using a rotary tool to cut out all of my pieces. Just make sure you lay something underneath. Sewing time. I started with the back and bust darts, and then I connected the side front panels to the main front piece. I recommend you press all of your seams open at this stage because they won't be as easy to reach after you stitch the side seams and assemble the dress entirely. Press all of your darts inwards. I then assemble the dress by stitching the shoulder and the side seams together. At this point, I tried my dress on and I was very satisfied with the result. So now it's time to repeat all of those steps with the main fabric. Once again, I laid all of my pattern pieces on the fabric, marked the seam allowance, and then cut everything with my rotary cutter. This time, I will be adding an invisible zipper to the back pieces before assembling the dress. I recommend using a zipper foot to really get close to the zipper teeth. I stitch making sure I roll open the zipper to stitch as close as I can to the teeth. It's best to knot your threads on the inside so that the zipper won't accidentally tug on them. I then closed the back seam and covered the end of the zipper. Just like the lining, I stitched the side front pieces to the center front piece, making sure I take extra time around the curved parts. Then I carefully press the seams open. I'm using the lowest heat setting on my iron, and I even go as far as using a piece of scrap fabric to protect my silk. I then stitch together the shoulder and the side seams. Time to make the collar. I put together 2 layers of silk, right sides facing, and a layer of thick interfacing. I stitched with a minimal seam allowance, turned it inside out, and top stitched everything. I then pinned my collar to the dress and stitched them together. And with that, my base dress was ready. Stay tuned for part 2 to see how I attached the lining and the notions. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was helpful for you.